Good morning, James. Thank you very much for taking part in the Business Spotlight series. On that note, I'm going to hand straight over to you to introduce yourself and what you do.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is James Manero. I'm the Managing Director of C Group Developments. We are a build-to-rent developer, and I started working here back in May. My role is to launch our build-to-rent platform, which is called Planted Living, and that will be launching in Q1, Q2 2024. And we are our build-to-rent platform is a boutique offering, which is offering slightly smaller, more streamlined amenity offerings with our developments, and we are growing those developments across the UK. Our first development is over in Bath, and we have a number of other sites in the pipeline.
Okay, excellent. And tell me a bit more about it. What makes it a bit different, if that makes sense?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think a lot of businesses these days have got ESG on the agenda, but many of those businesses are putting ESG on the agenda just as a box ticking exercise to make sure that their boards and their shareholders are satisfied, or maybe certain sort of regulations are adhered to. I think we probably designed our business a little bit more around ESG and trying to ensure that we are offering a product which is going to be optimal for all the different E's, the S's and the G's. Being a slightly smaller sort of BTR scheme means that we can slot ourselves into a much broader range of locations. So we won't be just in the major cities like Manchester, Liverpool, London. With a 150, 200 unit BTR scheme, you can find yourself quite easily in a smaller location with smaller populations, large towns rather than big cities. So we feel that we can achieve growth and scalability pretty quickly as a result of that, just because there'll be a lot more locations open to us as a development opportunity. And I think that going back to the ESG side of things, obviously being a smaller development will be emitting less carbon because our developers physically will be smaller buildings, and from the sort of social element, we will be able to, adopt a sense of community on a much easier basis than we would if we were, a sort of 500, 600, 700 unit tower or development, basically. And I would say that, yeah, those are probably the main drivers as to what makes our business model slightly different. And how we intend to approach the market. So we're looking at two different strategies. There's a sort of development strategy, and we've got more of a kind of investment strategy where we're sort of forward committing and buying up other developers almost finished sites. So we look at buying stuff which is maybe a year to a sort of year and a half out from being completed, which means we can still engineer it to optimize it for BTR. We can put our branding, our interior design, etc., etc. So that's what we've been focusing on. Obviously, markets with everything with the government's, let's say, experiment that they conducted over the sort of last half of the year has meant that a lot of investors are sitting back and waiting for 2023 to kick in before they kind of make their decisions on where they're going to be putting their money. But ultimately, they have to spend their money somewhere. So we're expecting the beginning of the year is going to be pretty busy, meeting with equity and closing deals.
Brilliant. And so, yeah, you mentioned there, obviously, it's, you look to buy them about a year and a half out. Is that basically the point where a lot of the sort of structural build is done, but then it's about the internal fit out in terms of, plumbing, etc., where you can make a difference?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But obviously, we need to be quite comfortable with the development, because we need to ensure that it's future-proofed. So we need to, be trying to achieve high, B level, A level, EPC ratings, Fitwell scores, etc., etc. So there's quite a lot of DD that will go into the work that would have been done up to that sort of 18 or 12-month period to ensure that the building will meet our requirements with regards to ESG, but also I guess health and safety as well. A lot of investors now are requiring 2 stair cores, because there'll be new fire regulations coming down the line in the next year or so, where anything over, I think, 18 meters is going to require a second stair core, a second means of escape, or alternative pressurized stair core. So there will be a lot of DD that will be done at that point, leading up to sort of when we can then take it on. And if it kind of matches what we're looking for in terms of the actual construction, then it's sort of 18 to 12 months. There's still enough time for us to as I said, engineer the scheme for BTR. So that might mean taking out the ground floor unit to allow a bit more amenity space. We don't, as I said, at the beginning, we're not, we're a bit more of a streamlined amenity service. So we don't have, cinemas and private dining rooms and all this kind of stuff, but we have what we feel are services which are more needed and used by residents. So that'll be a gym space, a co-working space, and a concierge. Those are sort of three core priorities for any kind of development we've got. And if we're buying up a scheme sort of 12 to 18 months out from practical completion, we still feel there's enough time for us to engineer that particular build to sell development and optimize it for build to rent.
Okay, yeah, really interesting. And what would you see as the challenges for you moving forwards?
The challenges we've felt immediately has been as a result of as I said, the general market conditions caused by government. How do I put it politely? Caused by government action, let's say, has caused a lot of things to just change quite considerably in the short term. I think there was quite a large shock where yields started to go out as a result of interest rates going up. There weren't that many transactions that took place in the last half of the year, so there's not that much comparable data to determine where yields should be. And that's meant that a lot of investors have got a bit nervous and they have required higher yields. But also they still have their return requirements. So some returns might be high teen IRRs, for example, with the same with higher yields as well, which means that deals were falling out basically. So we had some investors line up some deals, and that ended up kind of, because of the more cautious approach they were taking, meant that those deals were no longer viable for those investors, which meant the challenge was for us, we had to go kind of back to the drawing board, start either looking for new sites or looking for new equity. And the approach we had, which we have kind of changed, was we had sites that we were trying to find the equity for, but what we were coming up against were these either regulatory hurdles or sort of return hurdles from the investors. So our determination was to change our strategy and go more for an approach where we would find sites or develop a strategy which was reflective of what the equity were looking for. So the equity were more interested in much lower risk, given the climate, not so much construction risk, given where the construction development costs have gone to, and also specific asset classes like single family, where they feel there's going to be huge demand and they will still retain huge demand. So we kind of adapted our strategy somewhat to ensure that we could face those demands and change our strategy to meet what the equity was looking for. Those were the kind of the short-term challenges. Long-term challenges, or let's say challenges going into 2023, 2024. It's difficult to say given the way the government behaves. I would hope that they won't do anything that is too rash and cause all the banks and the markets to start panicking again. I think that we will be facing still another challenging year where interest rates will still remain high. Maybe they'll start coming down towards the end of 2023. Hopefully it start to stabilize somewhat. Challenges at the moment are still that build costs are, while they seem to have been plateauing, they're not coming down yet to where they were historically, which means there's still a lot of sites out there where vendors are expecting returns which in this current climate are not achievable or unrealistic. And it seems as though, I think, speaking to various different industry sort of parties, people were expecting that vendors were going to start reducing their prices, but I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. I think vendors they have their price they want to achieve, and some will probably reduce prices, but I think the ones that are not in a rush and don't need to get rid of that particular land site as quickly as possible will just hold out and wait for markets to hopefully stabilize. So there'll be that period between now and then when markets do stabilize and build costs do start coming back into sort of more historic levels, where there'll be a challenge to find sites which stack up financially, basically. And the ones that do stack up financially, unless you've already got exclusivity on it through some mechanism, you'll find that you've got a lot of competition for it. And again, what's going to end up winning out will be developers that have got investors behind them who are looking for lower returns and maybe looking at a longer term play, are looking to keep their money in for 10, 15 years so they can afford to take single digit returns, versus developers who are maybe got investors who are looking for double digit returns. And that just makes it a little bit more competitive. So I think that will probably be the challenge in the next 12 months is finding sites that stack up financially, which I think is always the challenge, but in particular in this particular climate where build costs are, it just rules out a lot of sites that previously would have been viable, aren't viable currently.
Great, thank you. Great, some good insight there. Thank you. And on a slightly different, but still similar in terms of insight, what would you say has been your biggest learning in business?
Generally, or in the last 6 months?
Well, I was thinking generally, but let's
generally, good question. Lots of lessons. What one strikes me as the most important, though, is a difficult question to answer. I would say being patient is probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned. I started running my own business back when I was mid-20s, 25 or 26 or something. I did that for a good 14, 15 years running my own business. It's only since I've joined C Group that I've become employed again for the first time in 15 years. Prior to that, I always ran my own business. And in those younger years, I was always quite impatient. I wanted to, make the money, make the deal, get it done now, and always expected that as a result of my understanding of how things should be. And I guess that those years taught me, as I said, sort of patience, that you don't become whatever you view as being successful, whether it's, getting your business to a certain milestone or financial milestone personally, whatever those things might be, it doesn't happen as quickly as you expect it to, which I guess is a good thing and a bad thing, because if you have that kind of mentality where you don't, because things don't happen as quickly as you expect them to, but you don't allow that to change your actual goal or whatever that milestone is, it's there's that kind of cliche saying that the most successful entrepreneurs are the ones that don't give up, and they always face down the risks, and they always face down the failures and all that kind of stuff. Absolutely, everyone's got failures. I've got failures, and anyone who tells you they haven't is talking nonsense, quite frankly. But I think if you maintain that core drive, that main ambition that's keeping you going, and you realize that just because something doesn't go to plan, and just because you do fail at some point, doesn't mean that your idea or your sort of core motivation is incorrect. It just means you weren't ready yet, or it just hasn't happened. And so the main lesson in business is learning patience and understanding that just because something doesn't work the first time or the second time or the 10th time doesn't mean that it's not due to work. It just means that maybe your approach was wrong, your timing was wrong, the parties with which you were going into business or conducting business, or your customer profile, something was wrong within that sort of very complex set of variables to bring success. Something was wrong within that mix, and doesn't mean that your core ambition or motivation for doing whatever that particular business was is incorrect. It just means that one or more of those variables needs to be changed, and you need to be patient in order to and you need to recognize that needs to be changed, or what it is that needs to change, and keep moving forwards.
Definitely. And what would you say inspires you, James?
What inspires me? I think since I've started working with C Group, it's probably working with other people who are more experienced than myself and have been there and done that. As I said, going from a younger age where you think you know everything and there is no one else who knows more than you do, and whatever they do know, that's fine. You can still do, you can bring your part to the table. I think there is a lot to be said for working with people who are more experienced and been doing this, whatever their particular business is, longer than you have, and being able to learn from other people. And those people that you are working with or working for or whatever have in their own way have their own unique failures and successes, and being able to see that, you know, even for people that you admire, you look up to, whatever, that are more experienced, that have been doing something longer than you have, and maybe have been through possibly greater failures than what you have, because their businesses were larger than yours, or whatever the situation might be, but they're still going and they're still very well respected and still knowledgeable. That's quite inspiring to see that, you know, that at all levels you can get failure, but at all levels you can still get people that will take that failure and turn it into something that is positive for them, and keep going. You know, don't give up. If you give up, you never succeed.